Come on, do something cool.
We have lightning now.
That's not cool enough.
Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages,
Especially all you druids out there, with Diablo 4 now being out for a few weeks, you've probably got a fair amount of levels under your belt. You're up there gathering gear, you're looking for legendaries and uniques, of course, but which unique should you be on the lookout for specifically? Which ones should you be willing to change your entire build when you see them drop, and which ones will just sit in your stash for the foreseeable future until they receive notable buffs in some way, shape, or form? Today I'm going to break down the druid-specific uniques, every one of them, the ones that no other class can use, rank them from 1 to 8 because there's actually 8 of them, over their actual strength and usability in the current meta, as well as of course their ability to be even used in builds currently. Without further ado then, let's get started at the bottom with number 8. It was a bit hard choosing between the last two, but I put Storm's Companion in this slot as much as it really does sadden me to be here. Conceptually, this one is really cool as a unique. It turns your wolves into lightning wolves, and it gives them the Stormhowl ability. It can even stack with the legendary that makes your wolves into werewolves so that you can have lightning werewolves. The thing is, companions as a whole, at least once you reach late game within Diablo 4, which is where you need to be to even have uniques drop really, are quite weak. You cannot really tell them what to attack consistently. Of course you can have them leap on an enemy every once in a while, but it's just not frequent enough and it doesn't direct them enough for a long-term fight. Their damage isn't great unless you go full on in minions in every way, and even if you do that, they don't gain a whole lot from this unique specifically. It mostly just changes their damage to lightning damage instead of physical. On top of this, while Druid has multiple passives that give you lucky hit chance when applying lightning damage to enemies to possibly proc an effect, the wolves, even when infused with lightning, do not count towards this for whatever reason, and that just completely ruins the potential of this unique. Trust me, I really wanted to use it in my lightning storm build. I tried some variations, I had the wolves running, I did a few dungeons and messed with it, and I could not make it feel like it was doing anything useful in the slightest. Hopefully in the future we get some sort of buffs either to this unique or to companions as a whole for Druid. Hell, even just letting lightning wolves proc the lightning passives would be massive. So we'll see what happens in the future, but for now I think this one is in dead last, because even the build that it thematically should work in just doesn't make it any stronger. Number 7 then is Hunter Zenith, the shapeshifting ring. This one isn't terrible conceptually, but the big mistake that it makes is assuming that a bear-wolf hybrid build would be strong, would be one of the better ones. The builds do exist in theory, you could make one, there's a key passive for it and everything, you could try to make it work, but the problem is that there are a lot of defensive effects that boost mixing these shapeshift forms, but nowhere close to enough offensive ones for mixing these shapeshifts. This ring also has a similar problem. When you get a kill with a werewolf skill, it makes your next non-ultimate bear skill either cost no resource if it's a core skill, or have no cooldown if it's not. But the only thing that really has any relevance to, realistically, is Debilitating Roar, which is a defensive skill. Pulverize costing no resource is nice, but you would just have to use a wolf skill to get a kill in order to trigger it, and that just doesn't wind up being worth it, because you'd rather use just a full bear build with Pulverize and have more resource anyways. Trample, if you were in a trample slide build, having no cooldown is a novel concept, but again, it would mean that you would have to build wolf skills into the trample slide build and make them strong enough to use as a consistent offensive weapon to get these kills, but even then, there's stronger things in the slot, as trample slide already takes a lot of offensive aspects to make it function properly in the first place. Then on the other side of it, killing with a bear skill makes your next wolf skill heal you a small amount. That side of the effect is much less meaningful, really. It's not like it completely is unusable as a unique, it's just nowhere close to good enough to make it into the proper druid builds currently being ran, the actually strong ones. So maybe if balance patches could change which builds work, this one could become better, but currently I think it is firmly second to last.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Sixth up then, I've put Mad Wolves Glee. This one and number 5 are pretty close, arguably relatively interchangeable, but the main reason that I've ordered them this way is the actual stats on the items. This unique makes werewolf form your true form, meaning you aren't really a human form unless you use a human transforming skill, and this gives you +2 ranks to all werewolf skills. The beauty of this is that it applies in combination with Tempest Roar, meaning that you can make storm skills count as werewolf skills and then also boost their ranks by 2 points each. But the issue is that that just isn't overly meaningful. 2 ranks spread across various skills is less useful than 4 ranks in one skill that you want to use a lot. And this just isn't enough, at least not in difficult content, because firstly, this doesn't really have enough value without Tempest Roar, you can't really use Mad Wolves Glee without it, but then that means that you're giving up 2 typically strong defensive gear slots for offensive gain, which in most content just isn't quite worth it. And of course, Mad Wolves Glee is just nowhere close to as effective as Tempest Roar, so Tempest Roar wins out in that situation where you have to choose between them. On top of that, the actual actual stats on it aren't great at all for a chest piece, a typically defensive slot. It has move speed, which is cool to have on a chest piece, but most wolf builds can already breach movement speed cap even without it. And then it has physical damage, which is just okay, poison damage, which is only really properly helpful in a poison focused build, and damage reduction from poisoned enemies, which is at least one good defensive affix, but that's just not quite good enough unless your entire existence is spent clearing low level content. After that we have Insatiable Fury, which is essentially just for all intents and purposes the same thing as the last one, but for bear form instead of wolf. It puts you in bear form permanently and boosts bear skills by 2 ranks. This one is slightly better because there is at least a passive that benefits from being in bear form, being the guaranteed overpower once every 20 seconds. This isn't a great passive necessarily, it's definitely not worth using the chest for alone, but it is a benefit nonetheless. The problems with this are quite similar to the ones with Mad Wolf as well, but this unique at least has some decent relevance if you get it before you have Vasily's Prayer. There are earlier stage pulverized builds that exist before the unique helmet, and they actually benefit quite a bit from this, so if you get it early, it's actually quite good, both for the guaranteed overpower and from the bonus bear skill ranks. But then the build as a whole changes when you get the unique helmet, at which point you run into the same issue. 2 typically defensive armor slots not being used for defensive gear. That said, this chest piece does at least have both armor percent increase in bear form, which is pretty good, and damage reduction while fortified, which again is quite good, so 2 defensive stats that are quite high tier. But then overpower damage, which we don't really need given that willpower is our main stat, which just stacks overpower damage just passively, and physical damage, which again is just sort of okay. There are much better damage boosting skills for a druid. This one is definitely just a touch better than Mad Wolf's, but when you get to the proper endgame version of the build that is intended to be a part of, again, it just isn't good enough to stick around, and so I can't put it any higher than this, as every unique from here on out fuels a build on its own in some way. In 4th then, we have Vasily's Prayer. This is the final piece to make the pulverized build really shine, the proper piece that makes the endgame version of the build possible. This makes your earth skills count as bear skills, and also makes them give you Fortify. Fortify is super important for the build in general, and making your earth skills count as bear skills both lets you stay in bear form permanently while you're in combat, it lets you use an arguably stronger basic attack too, and most importantly it means that Grizzly Rage doesn't take away your earth abilities, so you still have full access to your kit while in it. It takes a normally defensive slot, but if you only have 1 unique in a defensive slot, you can still perfectly manage just fine. It has lightning resistance, which is sort of irrelevant really right now, but it also has max life, which is quite nice to have. A nice large amount of overpower damage, which at least does have an effect with the build, even though it's not the most important one by any means, and then damage while shapeshifted is actually a pretty strong damage related skill, having much higher roll potential than just straight up physical damage, but being always active due to the nature of the unique effect itself. This unique is a firm part of one of Druid's strongest builds, but it isn't really a requirement to make the build work in the first place, so much as it just finishes off the combo completely. Pulverize as a build is still really good even without this, so while I am of course giving it credit for being the cherry on top of that build, I mean literally as it is a helmet, but I am weighing it a bit less than uniques that straight up make other builds work in the first place, especially good ones. Number 3 then is Waxing Gibbous, the one-handed axe that literally makes the bounce bolt build that I love physically possible. That build would not exist without this axe, and it is an incredibly cool unique entirely in its own right. When you get a kill with Shred, this turns you invisible, and if you attack an enemy while invisible, you get guaranteed crits for up to 2.5 seconds. This creates one of the fastest farming builds in the entire game, as you can just dash around to any enemy using Shred that's in range, doing pops of AoE critical hits around them, and it looks slick as hell, and it's just an enjoyable build that is really quite strong. Again though, it does suffer a touch from being a unique weapon, blocking off a really important slot both for legendaries and for stats. It does have crit damage on it, which is a really big plus, but normally you would of course also want something like vulnerable damage on your weapon, so it at least loses out a little bit due to that. Still a very solid 3rd place though, in my opinion.
It's just a little dirty. It's still good.
For number 2, I've put Greatstaff of the Crone. This makes Claw a storm skill and also makes Claw cast Storm Strike when you hit it, with the Storm Strike dealing up to 150% of its normal damage. This is a really cool effect in my opinion, and it opens up some interesting builds, especially because it means you can get the busted strong effects of Storm Strike as a basic skill, while actually using Claw itself for the increased attack speed and 15% chance to attack twice when you use it if you take the Wild Claws enhancement. It is a firm part of the booming Bulwark build that is currently the strongest Nightmare Dungeon high tier pushing build that Druid has, which gives it a lot of credit in its favor, mostly used in combination with the Symbiotic Legendary to reduce the cooldowns of more important attacks significantly, which it does extremely well by letting you use Claw for the enhanced attack speed and double hit chance. I use it in my Trample Slide build as well for the exact same reasons, and so this is a firm part of one of the strongest Druid builds that exist. It is a firm part of an off-meta but still strong Druid build as well, and the only reason this isn't the top slot for me is simply because while it makes both of these builds a fair bit stronger than they'd be otherwise, it just isn't literally required for them to function in the first place. It just improves them significantly. On top of that, it is a two-handed weapon, which is an extremely important offensive slot. So even though the effect is powerful, it does mean that you're missing out on any other weapon legendaries, as well as the inherent affixes, the stats on the weapons. And given that it doesn't have either crit damage or vulnerable damage, that is quite a hefty price to pay. Number 1 is Tempest Roar. This fuels two of the strongest Druid builds around. One of them is arguably the strongest, second place at absolute minimum. This is the one Druid build that first cleared a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon. It's the one Druid build that first cleared Uberlith, outside of the old Toxic Claws Blurred Beast exploit build that they fixed instantly afterwards and nerfed to the ground because, again, not intended. And that, of course, is Wolfnado, the Tornado Werewolf build. It also fuels the Lightning Storm Werewolf build too, which is one of my personal favorites, with incredible power, especially in PvP if you fancy that type of content, but Tornado Wolf is the star of the show here. This unique makes your storm skills count as werewolf skills and also gives them lucky hit chance to restore spirit, which is incredibly good as you would use this for the storm to werewolf change regardless, but the lucky hit for spirit is just bonus passive spirit generation, which means more ability to spam your core skills, which of course the best builds for Druid are all about. This also lets storm skills interact with werewolf passives, including the ability to apply poison damage with crits, the ability to deal bonus crit damage to poison targets, and then of course if you tie in the Mighty Storm aspect, the Direwolf aspect, and the Rampaging Werebeast aspect, you get the ability to use Earthen Might as a key passive, but with Tornado, which is a lucky hit proccing machine due to its fast hit rate, on top of Grisly Rage with werewolf skills that has a building crit damage multiplier every time you get a critical hit. Combine that with Tornado having a super fast hit rate and Earthen Might procs giving you guaranteed crits, and then it's just such a beautiful natural synergy of so many things coming together, and it's all because this helmet exists. None of that would actually work in combination without the helmet. It lets Tornado and werewolf form interact in this just beautiful, harmonious way. That's it then, everyone. All of the Druid specific uniques ranked from worst to best, as well as why I believe this order to be accurate. Of course, these things could change if class balancing does occur. If they buff the capabilities of a mixed bear and wolf build, for example, then Hunter Zenith could become stronger. It's possible, but its base effect just isn't crazy in general. Not enough for me to think that it will instantly become number 1 by any means, just with a few shapeshifting buffs. It just may not be all the way at number 7 anymore if that happens, if that makes sense. I hope you've enjoyed this ranking then, and I wish you the best of luck in finding whichever of these uniques that you're after personally, especially now that the Druid loot table is officially fixed and we no longer get Barbarian weapons. Thank God. I swear half of the uniques that I've gotten on this character have been Barbarian weapons. I have salvaged so many, but worry no longer, I suppose. This is fixed. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.